Hello everybody, welcome to the Pink and Channels. Connor Southwell here today to talk about Billy Gilmour, someone who knows him very well, Ricky Waddell, who was his coach for 18 months at Rangers, I think if I'm correct, Ricky. Talk to me a little bit about, well, I guess let's start with first and foremost, how proud of you of his development since you've worked with him. He's obviously now a Champions League winner. He's now sort of embarking on a loan spell with Norwich. You must be incredibly proud of sort of what he's achieved since you worked with him.
Yeah, phenomenal. Really, really proud. And I think that is a word. And I always count myself lucky with the players that I worked with, not just Billy, a few others that I've managed to go and play at the top level or even, carve a career out the game. But with regards to Billy, very proud of having that time to work with Billy. I have to say I don't take any credit for his achievements. It's purely down to himself. Like to think I played a little part in his journey and his story, and hopefully that helped him on his way. But yeah, to think where he is now, from where he was then, he was a young player at Rangers obviously, and he always had that potential, but to see him realise that potential and hopefully now crack on at Norwich will be a really interesting next part to his story.
Well, that's get sort of the next obvious question, isn't it? When someone's worked with a player when they're fairly young, is did you see it in them when they were that age? Did you feel like that was the level they could reach, or has he kind of surpassed expectations in that regard?
I think Connor with Billy, I always think he was different in that regard, because you see other ones that I was fortunate enough to work with Andy Robertson at Queen's Park when he was a young player, and we probably, if we're honest, at that time didn't think, well, we definitely didn't think he would have went on to have the career. What his next step at that time was to get into Queen's Park's first team like any other young player. And there's been other ones you think, and you always hear those kind of stories about young players who are phenomenal when they're young. And actually in that group we had some brilliant players, the 2001 age group. And Billy was obviously one of those, but Billy was one that we always thought that, speaking to the coaching staff at the time, that you always thought he just had that something different. It wouldn't really, like the way he played against, for example, his last game that we saw him was against England. The way he played in that game and the way that I've seen him play for Chelsea is the way like we would see him play for, the under-15s, under-16s for Rangers. Just regardless who he was playing against, he would dominate. He would just be a step ahead of everyone. So at the time, like we always knew he had that sort of star quality, but you never know in youth football. You just never know. Sometimes, and there's a million stories of 16, 17, 18, 19-year-olds, which is a real crucial age group in youth football, that they maybe take the wrong channel or they get a bit of bad luck, they get an injury. But for Billy, I think it was almost written in the stars that he was going to be a top player. He's still got the next phase to go though. He's still got to go and kick on now. So hopefully he'll do that.
What is it maybe that, you kind of describe him as being steps ahead in those games. What was it that put him sort of steps ahead? Was it kind of the mentality side of things, the tactical side of things, that sort of stuff? We talk about young players having a lot of ability, but that's not always necessarily sort of the full package, is it, for a player to then become professional and really kick on in their career?
No, you're right, Colin. They've got to have an element of all the areas that the ingredients, if you like, that make a young professional player. But Billy, technically, touching on that, was probably superior at the time. He had the tools to get himself out of any situation within a game. You see him in little tight situations, you think, oh, he's under pressure here, and he'll work his way out of it. But I think his mentality was the main thing, that he always had that, like I said just previous there, that he always had that mental strength to, regardless who he was playing or what the situation was, just a very, very level-headed lad off the park. But on the park, ultimately, he was a winner. He had that winning mentality, and he had a quiet confidence. He was never arrogant, but he had that real quiet confidence in his ability. And I think people maybe talk about his physicality, and that's one area I've seen a big difference. He's obviously not a tall young guy, but he never was a tall young guy. He was always playing against taller players, and it really is a good example. But he's added that power and strength into his game as well. But on top of that, when I say he's a step ahead, like he just played, as if there was a camera on top of his head. He was just that game awareness, that vision, that ability to see pictures and process that information and then execute the pass, shot, cross, whatever it was. He just had that. That's what being a step ahead is. Just that ability to process the information that a football player gets at the time they receive the ball or just before it, find themselves space and then execute the action, whatever's going to be next. So, and he just had that in abundance, and you can still see that in his game, obviously, today, playing at the top level.
Does that challenge you as a coach when you have a player that is a step ahead and is doing all the things that maybe other players aren't doing? Do you have to almost change how you work with them and how you approach their training sessions?
Yeah, absolutely. Good question, because that is the job of a coach, to challenge your players. There's nothing worse than having a session that's too easy for your players. And like I say, that particular group at Rangers, the 2001 age group, they were all very good players. Billy was a standout at the time, but they were all very good. So you had, as a coach, it was my job to put on exercises, to put on sessions that were challenging them in every aspect of football, physically, mentally, tactically, and technically. So that was the thing about being a coach, and certainly being Billy's coach at that particular time, to put on sessions that were good enough in order for those players to be challenged and therefore progress.
When he was that age, was there anyone from the first team or maybe even the step above that were looking at him with interest at that stage? When was the point, do you feel, that he really came on to, because I know he was obviously involved in squads relatively young age, wasn't he, for the Rangers first team? Was there a point when you were there that someone had a conversation with you about him in terms of first team level?
Yeah, I mean, I think I always remember speaking to Kenny Miller very briefly. Kenny Miller was a player in the first team at Rangers at the time, and I think Billy was just starting to make his way, into training every now and again. When it was Mark Warburton was the manager, he was starting to kind of make his way into training on the odd occasion with the first team. And I remember speaking to Kenny and some of the other staff at the time, and just talking about how good this young player is. And when you see Billy, he does look very young. Like even now, like what, he's 20, but he still looks quite young. But so at 15, 16, 17, he definitely looked young. So yeah, that obviously had that. So the perception of a young player going into a first team environment could be different for a player to think how good he's actually going to be. But I think as soon as the ball started to roll and he was getting touches on the ball, I think everybody could see how good a player that he was.
There's been a lot said about kind of his technical ability, and you're right there. There maybe is a perception, because he's not the tallest, to be honest. There is maybe a perception that off the ball he maybe isn't as great, and I think certainly from what you've alluded to and what other people have said when they're speaking about, and that's a bit of a misconception, isn't it? He seems to enjoy a tackle.
He does, and he's a boy from Ayrshire, and if you generalise that category of person or player, they want to get stuck in, to put it lightly, and you've seen it. I mean, I remember seeing it in an England game. He sprinted back. I think Scotland lost the ball. He sprinted back to 20 yards, 30 yards, and he's got himself back goal side, and it might have been Declan Rice. I can't remember who he tackled, but he got tore right into him. A solid tackle. He won the ball back, and then he passed the ball away. But Billy, he's got that in his game. He's not a player who sole job breaks up play, but if required, and that's the difference. When I saw him, Connor, that time, actually, I seen he had that power to sprint back at 100% and then make a tackle. But yeah, he's not a player that's just going to sit and break up play and make simple passes. He's a player that can do that. He has that in his tool set. It's not his main attribute. He wants to link the game from defence to middle to front and join in and attacks, I assume. But he can do that, which you need as a modern day midfielder. You need to have that in your game as well, especially in the English Premiership, where there is a physical element to every game.
I've watched a kind of few videos on him and a few interviews, not just with him, but with his family as well, who all seem to do a great job of sort of keeping him grounded. Maybe there's well, you probably in a better place to comment in terms of character. He just doesn't look fazed by anything, or particularly kind of off the floor, feet off the ground kind of person, even with the success he's had, winning the Champions League at 20, obviously playing for Scotland against England at Wembley at 20 and being man of the match in that game. That would affect a lot of people. It doesn't seem really to have fazed it. He seems to have taken it all in his stride.
It does, and that's like that is testament to himself and his family for sure. I need to get some tips on doing that for my own children, but see if they can become level-headed at some point. Mine are just young, but I think I always remember with Billy Connor that like it was at the point where all the speculation was going on about him going down to Chelsea, and I always remember seeing like the players asking him, the coaches asking him, from the different age groups, and thinking, like, goodness, that boy's getting put under pressure, not bad pressure, but like putting under pressure, people asking him about what's happening, are you going to Chelsea, who are you going to? There was other teams involved in it as well, and I just thought to myself, that is a real amount of pressure to have that burden on your shoulders, and having to almost answer everybody who was asking him a question. And I really admired him for that, purely because he just took it, like you said, he just took it all in his stride, like the Scotland game he gets flung in, like anything else that he's done, his games that he's played for Chelsea. He has that mental ability just to, treat each situation as it is and just focus on what he wants to do. And he has that natural enthusiasm for football that just supersedes any other question that's going on in his head. So he's carried a lot of that on his shoulders since he was very, very young, and he's handled it superbly, and it is testament to his family and who are grounded people themselves. So
I saw Frank Lampard speaking, I think it was last year, but I've obviously watched it in recent weeks when kind of the move to Norwich came about, and he was kind of speaking about him always being the best trainer and being the person on the training pitch that really sets the standards, and is often quite demanding of those senior players as well. And is that maybe a reason, again, we kind of speak about his development and maybe how it was kind of written in the stars? Is that something that you saw from a fairly young age, that intensity and that quality in training to always be the best, and that winning mentality as well is kind of born from that, I would imagine?
And that's exactly that, Conor. He has that winning mentality, and he's not overboard with it, for sure. Certainly when I had him as a young player, he would lead by example first and foremost, by what he'd done himself on and off the ball. But he would demand things of other players. But all the players respected him, and because he was such a good lad off the park, there was never any, the players were always very they respected each other, for sure, and we demanded that as coaches. But there was always that respect. That the players knew that Billy was a top player, and they knew that he was always the best in training, and they knew that 9 times out of 10 he would be the best player in a game situation. So he drove everybody forward, and like I say, like you mentioned earlier on, he challenges coaches as well, because he's so good, not in a negative way, not in any other way other than just because he's such a good player, and he demands to be the best, and he deserves to have the best session put on for him and his teammates. So in that sense, he's always wanting to push himself, and I have no doubts, he's going to go right to the top and continue to be there.
I know you mentioned physicality earlier on. Are there other areas of his game when you watch him now that he's significantly improved from when you had him at Rangers?
When I watch him now, it almost looks like he did when he was young, and he just used to dominate that position all the time. But the physicality is definitely a major step forward for him. And as you know, the English Premier League has, they're a team of athletes. You are required to have your body in tip-top shape every time you enter the field. So, and he's obviously added that, and having the backup and the knowledge base that he's been at a club like Chelsea, which should have that, and all the scientific areas of player development and body development that they'll have. He's obviously took advantage of that. But I think when you watch him now, that he has added that. He was always tenacious. He always had that tenacious bit, but and I always like to see him getting forward as well and joining in on attacks. He's not just that link player, and he's really just that good all round sort of midfielder. But he's added that probably speed of play, and just probably naturally he's always had it. But he's added that speed of play and speed of thought to the next level, if that makes sense. Because if you're in a midfield and in England, playing against top players, some of the best players in the world, you need to be that step ahead as much as you can, and he's continued to add that to his game, because it's all very well being the best at a youth level, but can you take when the tempo and the better players come against you? Can you still be that step ahead? And I can see that in his game still to this day.
That's really interesting. There's been some debate, hasn't there? I think Graham Souness is probably the big name in terms of saying actually he should probably have stayed at Chelsea and worked with the quality of players. I think you referenced Phil Foden at Manchester City as being an example. You've had some that said actually no, the loan route is the best option for him now. How do you kind of see it? Do you think that decision to join Norwich at this stage is the right one in his career at this moment?
I would say yes, because who knows really, but because he could go and play 30, 40 games for Chelsea, and then you would be saying then that was the right thing for him to stay. But they obviously rate him very, very highly, and it's obviously been thought through. The fact that Norwich play a style of football that's very conducive to Billy himself, and that's going to demand him getting on the ball all the time. The fact that he might be put in a situation, don't shout at me here, but like with Norwich, they might be up against it in some games, which with Chelsea, 9 times out of 10, 8 times out of 10, you're probably dominating possession of the football. So it'll give them different aspects, maybe similar to playing with Scotland. They don't always dominate possession of the football. So for his own development as a professional player at the top level, me personally, I think it's a good move. I'm really excited to see him and see how he gets on and that and the team. And I've got absolutely no doubt if he keeps injury free, he'll go and kick on, and he'll add to the Norwich City team and help it progress for sure.
Do you think he'll? I mean, you probably know Kenny McLean as maybe the best example from the Norwich midfield. Do you think he'll offer a different skill set to maybe Kenny and the other Norwich midfielders that they've got at the moment?
Yeah, I was thinking about that actually before coming on. With regards to Kenny McLean, Kenny's again a top player, brilliant. That he's worked his way through a different sort of pathway than Billy. Coming through the ranks at St Mirren and then Aberdeen and then on from there. But yeah, Kenny's, I think, probably goes forward. They're similar in many senses. They're very good passers, very, very good game awareness. But I think Billy's more of that sort of link player from defence to middle. Kenny maybe links to play more from middle to front. In general terms, they both can do both roles pretty well, I'm sure. And I'm pretty sure that the two of them will be relishing the opportunity to play in the midfield together.
Absolutely. And do you think Norwich's track record in terms of developing youth players, obviously seen a few come through, Ben Godfrey, James Maddison as well. I mean, Buendia's just moved to Villa, or that's slightly different. But you've obviously got Max Aarons as well, Todd Cantwell, Ollie Skipp had a very good season on loan at Norwich last year. All of these factors, do you think will have gone into that decision to kind of place him at Norwich?
Yeah, because that shows there's a clear pathway for the young players at Norwich as well. It also shows the mentality of the coach and the first team staff, and they want to. They have a team that's set up for young players to come in and go and express themselves. And young players need one thing and one thing only: they need an opportunity. And Norwich is obviously giving opportunities to all those players that you had mentioned there. This is an opportunity for Billy. He's on a slightly different pathway, but essentially they still have that mentality of bringing through young players and having an opportunity for young players, which Billy still is a young player. So for me, it all stands Billy and Norwich in good stead going forward into the new season, Connor.
It's really interesting, as you said, about being excited, because I mean he's still at that age, isn't he, at 20, where maybe let's say, and obviously we hope this doesn't happen, but let's say Norwich get relegated and maybe it doesn't pan out to be the positive experience that maybe he's experienced elsewhere in his career. That's a different kind of learning curve, isn't it, and to what he's experienced. And it's going to be really interesting to see how he gets on in that sort of environment when he's kind of been used to, as you say, maybe dominating games and being in sides that dominate the ball. Norwich, you're going to have to squander that a little bit more this year. So in terms of, and we've kind of spoken about his mentality, to bring this round full circle, do you feel that's going to serve him maybe really well in this loan, where he's going to have to adapt to different circumstances in a different environment against, as you said earlier, some of the best players in the world?
Yeah, absolutely. He's going to be in a situation where, like you just said there, that situations that he's probably not been in as much before, where, you know, Norwich might be giving away possession to your Liverpools and Man Cities, and but he has the tools to be a quick with that. You know, that level of football, sometimes it becomes so tactical that, you know, that they do it comes very position specific in terms for a midfielder, that they're maybe sitting off the game, so that he'll have that knowledge base. But yeah, I think it comes when those sort of experiences, and I hope it doesn't happen, but you know, maybe Norwich go, you know, 2, 3, 4 games without a win. That in itself becomes a big experience to take, because it comes with different pressure. You know, all of a sudden the dynamic changes. You know, if you're winning games, it's not easy, of course, to keep that going, but you know, that gives you good momentum. But when you start to lose momentum, you can lose momentum within a single game, but you can also lose momentum over the course of 2, 3, 4, 5 games, and we've all seen it. And it becomes, you know, the Norwich crowd are pretty demanding, I'm sure, and it becomes a different animal, where you've got to deal with different pressures as a player, where it's not as free-flowing as you would like it, and that will stand Billy and all the players in good stead. It all comes under experience of being a top player, and if Billy uses that and other players use that to their as a positive over the course of the whole season, rather than just living for the moment, then it will help progress and develop Billy himself as a player.
Absolutely. Just finally then, are there any sort of nice stories or nice memories you have of Billy from your time working together at Rangers?
To be honest, just working with him was a good story in itself. And like I say, I certainly don't take credit for him or any of the other lads' progression. It's down to himself and getting that opportunity to go and progress. I do remember, not so much a nice story, but I do remember one time I had a trialist lad come in, and I think he was trying to rough up some of the other lads, and I didn't particularly see it on the park, but I'd heard in the changing room after that Billy had got hold of this particular player and verbally sorted him out. And isn't he say that, like, the lad never bothered the rest of the boys again? So he's got that in him, you know. He's got that sort of leadership quality in him to protect his players that are also his friends. But like I say, he was just a joy. He really was. He was a joy to work with, and I think he's going to be a great player for Norwich, I'm pretty sure.
Lovely stuff, Ricky. Thank you so much for your time.